Reason Beacon welcomes you to a video explaining what we are all about, which boils down to a discussion concerning the future of the United States of America and the Democratic Republic for which it stands. I'm Paul, and I'm broadcasting this channel from my bedroom studio in the great Pacific Northwest. Fundamentally, Reason Beacon is about trying to heal our own and our nation's soul. And right now, they are souls that are in need of some tender care. I invite you to join me on a journey of discovery into the modern unknowns that bedevil us. We may make a mistake or two along the way, travel down a few dead ends, and get thoroughly lost at times, but together, I believe, we can make some progress. You can follow this journey by subscribing to the Reason Beacon. More importantly, you can take part in the journey by using the comments to join the discussion, ask a few questions, or suggest directions we should pursue. Join us by clicking on that bell. And remember to click on that like button to give us some feedback. To nurture our souls, the first thing we need is philosophy or doctrine to guide us. I can think of no better doctrine than the ideal expressed in the opening of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is a voice expressing and defending the promise of America. These are words that strike fear and loathing into the hearts of every despot, dictator, and would-be dictator in the world. Hence, Reason Beacon adopts this philosophy as our guiding principle for all our investigations. And since these 6 lines are our guiding doctrine, let us examine each of them individually, so there will be no confusion. The first line is, we hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, these truths are so obvious to any reasonable person that they need no justification. They are our fundamental postulates or axioms. All of our analysis are based upon these assumptions. The next line is that all men are created equal. Men, in the context of the signers of the Declaration, meant male men holding real or tangible property. Times have certainly changed since these words were written. Today, in our analysis, we use an interpretation of men to mean all humanity. That is, any member of the species Homo sapiens. To me, this seems more reasonable. In short, I think it is self-evident. Note the word created. While children and women were initially excluded from the term men, the actual wording implies, in my opinion, that today children are included. And while children are deemed to be too young to participate in the governing process, they nonetheless retain their fundamental rights. Finally, we have to ask, what does the word equal mean in this context? Clearly, not all of us are born with equal resources. We don't all start life on equal footing. So then what does equal mean? I think it means we have to assume it means equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal freedoms, among other things. Clearly, we have a long way to go in order to achieve this ideal. The next line is, they are endowed by their Creator. In short, these are innate properties applicable to everyone. No one grants them to us. We have them when we are born. Next, we have the clause, with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable rights means that these rights cannot be taken away, denied, or transferred to another person. They reside within us forever. Then we get a list of some unalienable rights. So the next line says that among these are life, liberty. The right to life is obvious. We all have the right to live, and in particular, we should not be killed by another entity, including government. This is a tricky one, since if one person kills another, then by convention, we collectively, through our government, have the power of punishment. As with all unalienable rights, we have to face the possibility that those who violate the rights of others forfeit their own to some degree. The right to liberty basically means the right to do as one pleases without restriction. Again, if one violates the rights of others, this right may be forfeit to some degree. The words among these in this clause are important. They imply there are more unalienable rights than those listed in the Declaration. We adopt this point of view. Finally, we have the pursuit of happiness. Basically, the right to pursue happiness means you're able to freely pursue joy and live life in a way that makes you happy. Reiterating, these words from the Declaration of Independence form the guiding beacon from which we seek enlightenment and resolution to our problems. Before we proceed, you might well ask, why did I create this channel? Well, I'll tell you. One reason for creating the Reason Beacon stems from a major source of frustration that afflicts many of us and which infects the body politic. That is, the increasing disconnect between me and those running for political office. Here are some examples. I've paid into our economic governmental system for decades. Why isn't it then helping me? Like you, I feel this in my gut and am searching for an answer. Why must I become destitute before I am eligible to receive aid from an economic system that I paid into my whole life? Was accumulating assets for retirement all for nothing? Am I forced to give it all away? That just isn't fair. Many politicians keep telling us how well we are doing and how we are so great, but they totally ignore this emotional level of awareness of these real problems. And by ignoring them, they promote an us versus them consciousness that form an emotional divide between us all. But more fundamentally, I created this channel because, like many of you, my heart is aching. I love this country, and am sorrowed by the hate and division afflicting it. Perhaps together we can heal it. During the course of my more than 7-decade lifetime, I've noticed a certain spiritual meanness gradually creeping into our culture and society. Spilling over into the body politic, it is creating a nightmare of turbulence, chaos, and confusion. This spiritual meanness has many manifestations. I see it in the increasing use of innuendo, belittlement, and character assassination instead of a reasonable discussion of common issues. Too often, our discourse has degenerated into an unhealthy us versus them confrontation, instead of a realization that we're all neighbors and that we all need to pull together or we will lose. I love the United States, but recognize its flaws. And because I love this country, I want to make it better by addressing and correcting its flaws. It distresses me when citizens mindlessly attack one another in the name of patriotism. With all its flaws, USA is a great country, and with a little effort, we can make it greater. We just need a little perspective. Trying to keep things in perspective isn't easy. Every generation thinks the next one is going to hit hell, yet we're all still here. Nonetheless, we should learn the lessons of the past, but sadly, echoes of the past haunt my soul and color my perceptions. And, like you, I'm a prisoner of my past, but I'm trying to grow beyond my ignorance to cope with our new reality. As I ponder these things, I'm struck by how different, yet how eerily similar, the current malaise is to the past. Many of the current events I'm witnessing give me a feeling of deja vu. How many times have I seen this all before, I wonder? And like many others of my age, I'm a prisoner of my past. My heart is aching and breaking. Echoes of the past haunt my soul and color my perceptions. I lived through segregationist George Wallace's presidential campaign with his pledge of segregation forever. Today, I see disturbing echoes reviving this pledge. I lived through the civil rights protest marches of the 60s, yet today the marches continue. I witnessed police dogs attacking peaceful demonstrations in Selma, Alabama, and the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I witnessed the Vietnam War protests of the 60s and 70s and deaths such as the Kent State Massacre. I witnessed riots sparked by Rodney King's beatings. And recently, I witnessed a mob storm one of the 3 pillars of our government in support of an incompetent would-be dictator. The enormous damage to our government may take generations to repair, assuming we're able to repair it. And before all of this were the terrorist KKK groups, mob hangings of black people, implicit racism in our mass media. I saw Birth of a Nation. It was one of the most disgusting racist movies I ever witnessed. Look at the timeline of these events. They are separated roughly by 1 generation. Do we not learn from the past? Must every generation repeat the mistakes of the past? I, like you, am a prisoner of our past. I have never been a believer in mob governance or violence. My preferred solution to fixing problems is voting. It is a shame that so few citizens learn basic civics in school. It leaves them with a feeling of helplessness and despair. I'm a prisoner of my past. The mob violence of current riots are profoundly disturbing. Past instances of mob violence have somehow legitimized the use of mob action for both petty and profound grievances. I think this is an unintended consequence of the Vietnam-era violent protests. It shows how dangerous and fragile is our democracy. A democratic culture is more than a constitution and a collection of laws. Crossing democratic norms breeds both contempt and ultimately the destruction of our democracy. I am a prisoner of my past. The divisions in our body politic are exacerbated by politicians that prey on the fears and prejudices of the electorate. This has always been a problem, but recently it has become worse. I have a cousin whose parents were German. They watched the rise of Hitler in Nazi Germany using precisely the same tactics employed by our current leadership. She tried to warn us, but we didn't listen. We were so secure in our belief that it couldn't happen here, that while we theoretically acknowledged the possibility, we never actually believed it would happen here. Well, after watching our president fire most of the nation's inspector generals and emasculating their staff, among other things, then inciting an insurrection, I have to admit I was either too naive or simply wrong. I am a prisoner of my past. I want to believe in my country. I want to believe we are making progress. The death of George Floyd rent my soul with an emotional earthquake. My optimism is severely stressed. I'm holding on to a ray of hope for my children and grandchildren. Hopefully, this is not an illusion. I'm a prisoner of my past. I remember when the standard response to riots by those in power was, it's outside agitators. Everyone in our community is peaceful. These outsiders are scum and need to be taught a lesson, so they will never return. This dehumanizing of people justified the use of force, the sadistic use of dogs, beatings, and ultimately death of the demonstrators. I watched the hypocrites justify their action against unarmed, peaceful civilians. And as I hear the explanation of the riot's destruction and looting, I'm reminded of these past attempts to explain or justify the riot's responses. I'm a prisoner of my past. Are things different this time? I see the same riots. I hear the same rhetoric. Are we doomed to continue repeating our past mistakes? Possibly. But out of the chaos, I've noticed one thing is different. Most of the destruction and looting seems to be organized. It certainly seems to be true for the recent attack on the Capitol. But more broadly, multiracial gangs travel to cities with new tactics designed to destroy and to steal. The authorities are to believe they create destruction as a diversion to spread out police resources in order to steal unopposed. Coupled with these gangs are anarchists, political saboteurs, and others whose only goal seems to be destroy or discredit legitimate protest. All of these groups have become adept at hijacking legitimate protest demonstrations and converting them to serve their own ends. In the process, legitimate protests are discredited in the minds of many. I'm a prisoner of my past. I would like to believe things are different, but the past haunts me. Can we believe the authorities? Will we continue to confuse the messenger with the message? Will things become really different? Will the crazy, unjustified, and just plain false conspiracy theories win out in the end? I hope not, but they elected a president. I'm a prisoner of my past. I only know one thing for sure. No child is safe unless every child is safe. My heart aches. And because it aches, I created this channel. I love this country, and I'm sorrowed by the hate and division afflicting it. Perhaps together we can heal it. However, first, we have to identify the cause of the malaise. One cause, I believe, is the spiritual meanness I've noticed gradually creeping into our culture and society. Our discourse has degenerated into an unhealthy us versus them confrontation. Simplistic slogans that take the place of reason, such as love it or leave it, for example, are not the American way. In an attempt to bring some reason and perspective back into our lives, I want to step back from the struggles and grind of everyday life with its incessant bombardment of misinformation, doctored videos, and deliberate fakes, creating a swirl of innuendo, belittlement, and character assassination in order to look at the bigger picture. Unfortunately, the bigger picture is so hidden it will take a while to peel away the obscuring layers and discover the truth hidden beneath the overlying veil of ignorance, apathy, and ineptitude. Stripping away the layers of indifference, foolishness, and deceit in order to find enlightenment is liable to be an epic odyssey filled with many mistakes and pitfalls. Yet for the sake of our children, our grandchildren, and all those that come after us, we have to try. Let us know if you're interested in joining the discussions and traveling along this journey. Hit that like button. And if you want to follow it, click on subscribe and ring that bell to be informed of the latest videos. We'll start the healing process by asking a few simple fundamental questions, such as, where are we? That is, where are we culturally, socially, economically, politically, ideology, and any other way that we can think of that seems appropriate. These are complex topics. Catchphrases and simplistic slogans too often substitute for reason when considering these topics. For example, USA is filled with many diverse subcultures, each with their own unique history. Our USA is a land of subcultures that have to seek common ground. We can use our fundamental doctrine to find this common ground. These top-level topics just scratch the surface and don't consider any of the myriad subtopics, such as racism, government, religion, the environment, overpopulation. That's more than enough to get us started. But knowing where we are is insufficient. We need to also investigate for each subtopic, how did we get here? Where are we going? Where should we be going? And finally, the big question, how do we get there? These questions form the basis of our initial discussion topics, but they don't occur in a vacuum. An important consideration, almost universally ignored by commentators and pundits, is basic human nature. One of the great accomplishments of our Constitution is how it was designed to cope with human nature. The question that now faces us, is this design enough? I'm pursuing these topics because I haven't seen my eclectic views on these subjects articulated by anyone. Or perhaps I'm just nuts. On occasion, someone may touch on my views on a subject, but with increasing frequency, one cannot have a discussion on any of these subjects. Not a debate. I want to remain open-minded and learn more, without getting arbitrarily classified into some convenient group. For example, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, fascist, communist, socialist, an ethnic group, religious affiliation, and so on and on and on. I'm sure you too have experienced this to some degree. Once arbitrarily punched into one of these groups, discussion stops, and attributes both good and bad are often erroneously attributed to me. Because of this arbitrary classification effect, we need to also investigate how we can improve communication, especially in the face of such conditions as cognitive dissonance, Stockholm Syndrome, Dunning-Kruger effect, cult behavior, mob or internet action, and just plain ordinary human nature. We need to investigate the causes and cures of such things as the growing distrust among the body politic, not a new thing, but exacerbated by technology, especially the internet. We need to investigate the rise and destructive effects of mindless conspiracy paranoia. I have many thoughts on these topics, thoughts that hopefully we can explore and come to some conclusion. I could be wrong, but we'll see. Some of them may be a bit unconventional or even controversial. In fact, the discussions may get a little lively. The intent is to monthly post a major topic. While we want to step back and look at the bigger picture, there is no escaping current events. However, expect there will be smaller, more frequent posts related to current events, interviews on relevant topics, and online discussions.